Hey guys, what's up? This is False Bulls 123 and this is day 77 of my daily quarantine vlog. My room looks like shit and I am beyond caring. So, little mini emotional update for this week is just, for some reason I have just been on edge lately and I don't know why. I'm trying not to be honest, but just everything has just been grating on my nerves so much and I don't know why. So it's honestly, I think I'm just worried about everything that's happening in this world, everything just happening in my own life, and I know it's gonna get better, but I'm just really feeling the yoke this week, and I don't know. But you didn't come here to hear from my self-pitying whining. What? You didn't? Geez, you clicked on this video for the wrong reason then. But you know what you clicked on this video for? It was for me to talk shit and not shit about different musical genres. Because today, folks, this is False Bulls 123's Music Corner. Just like that SpongeBob meme, except instead of imagination, it's Music Corner. You get it. You are a memester. You know what's up, bitch. And so you're like, Ryan, what weird, obscure, and probably obnoxious genre did you listen to this week? And I'm just like, well, I'll probably put it in the description, but it's Kawaii Metal. And you're like, what's that, Ryan? That sounds like a fake thing that should not exist. And I'm just like, honey, this is the internet. Everything exists. Kawaii Metal is essentially a fusion genre of Japanese pop music and idol culture mixed with traditional heavy metal. And you're like, what? How does that work? Well, basically, imagine instead of a giant 250-pound man with a giant beard and a shaved head screaming obscenities, it's the same thing, but it's a cute Japanese girl. And you're like, that's pretty weird, but okay, go off, Quinn. And that's pretty much the sort of juxtaposition of the genre. You have these very intense lyrics, but the imagery and the singers are much more cutesy, or kawaii, as it's used in Japanese culture. There's also a distinct amount of use of idol culture, which is really part of the Japanese pop scene, as influence for the genre. I have seen some publications that use the term anti-idol as a description for some of the bands, but I don't know if that is a prevalent or common usage for the genre as a whole. Basically, since it was sort of a niche genre, but I think fairly well known for niches, I wanted to do my due diligence and actually take some time looking into the genre and listening to some music that wasn't super obvious. In the past, the only two bands I had known of in the genre were Baby Metal and Passcode, but I did do some research, by which I mean Googling Wikipedia, and so I picked, I think, a good cross-section of the genre in its entirety. That being said, if you have other Baby Metal or Kawaii Metal bands that you would be interested in showing or talking about, please list it down below in the comments. I always like to hear about new bands. Also, if you have any ideas for future music corners, I already have one planned out for next week, do let me know, because I would love to, experience it and learn more about the genres. Anyway, guys, let's move on into the actual thing, and yeah, let's just get into it. First up, I essentially decided to choose, I'm not really sure if you would call it the namer or the progenitor of the genre, but I basically chose the one that is pretty much the father, or rather mother of the genre. Let's use the feminine. And that is Baby Metal. If you don't know, Baby Metal is probably the most well-known and the most influential of the Kawaii Metal bands, and they're definitely the ones that sort of pioneered, that's a great word, the genre in itself. It follows, let's see, 3 different singers. I believe they might be related, but honestly, I'm not sure. Maybe I just assume that because of, that costuming, but who knows. And pretty much, you have very classical Kawaii Metal in the band sound. You have the very harsh vocals, you have the thrashing and shredding of the guitars and instrumentals, and then you also have the very cutesy dancing and also soft vocals mixed in with the more harsher tones. And so the juxtaposition between hard and soft vocals, or essentially metal screaming vocals and J-pop vocals, are really, the interplay between the two are really what makes such a strong sound in the genre. So I listened to their first album, which is also called Baby Metal, it is eponymous, And I actually really enjoyed it. I'm not a metalhead like I've stated before in these videos, and so I'm not very good at distinguishing different subgenres, of which there are many, of metal. I really can't tell my Avenged Sevenfold from my AFI. Genre-wise, I can obviously tell the difference between the two bands because they sound very different. But there are, like I said, there are many, many genres and subgenres and fusion genres of metal. And so I do apologize if my descriptions are either increasingly vague or just not a well-suited description of the sound. If you do disagree with the way that I categorize these, and most of these I take from most of the genre descriptions I use in these videos, I'm taking from the, informational pages that I find, on Spotify or Wikipedia or other places where, other people have categorized them, or from publications where the band talks about the genres. And I try my best to give them the closest genre I can find. Though a lot of bands, like you might realize when you start listening to a lot of diverse music, don't always fall perfectly into any genre description, and they can be part of a lot of different genres influenced by a lot of different genres. And so, not everything is perfectly fit into, boxes and pieces. That's a mixed metaphor if I've ever heard one. But let's go on. So, what I like about baby metal, I really love the sound. Like, as I said before, the interplay between just the harsh, growling vocals and the soft, cutesy J-pop is just so good. It's really what I like in the genre. Is really what just really drew me into the concept in the first place. And I also just really love the idea of just like these cutesy idols, your Moe Blob type show stuff, but then it's just like, excuse me while I shred this and talk about festering corpses or something, and you're just like, I love ironic juxtaposition, and so that type of style just really works so well thematically. I also really enjoy the sound of the music itself. I've heard baby metal described as power metal, and I think I can really understand the concept behind that. Sort of just that very intense but very accessible metal, kind of your Dragon Force style stuff, where you're listening to this intense but almost upbeat sound. And so it's something that is really motivating and energizing as a music genre. So I thought that was really interesting. I don't have too much to say about baby metal just because anything I can say about baby metal, since they've really pioneered the genre, can really be applied to a lot of the descriptions of the other bands. And so it's really hard to find a unique way to describe them since they've been so influential overall to the music of the genre in itself, so that anything I say afterwards will be reductive. And so I'm just going to get on to the two songs. So I think the best way to really understand Kawaii Metal is to listen to the band itself, and then to start branching out to where a lot of smaller niches or different genres overlap with the other bands. So I'll have to choose the absolutely fantastic single, I Want Chocolate, which I love just because it has a very cutesy, it has a cutesy name. It's like that Melanie Martinez thing where the subject matter could be super dark, and I'm not quite sure since I don't speak Japanese, but it has a very cutesy title. So you have that innocence versus mature sort of dichotomy there. I like stuck with that because it really works thematically, just that sort of innocent sounding name but then really intense music. The other song I wanted to recommend is Headbanger. I'm not sure how drawn out you have, but I'm pretty sure there's multiple R's in that title. And oh my god, it is absolutely great. It is literally just a love letter to the concept of headbanging as a musical phenomenon, and it's fantastic. Also, small story time. When I was in high school, we were in a fan video for one of our dancing contests that we did every year called Milli Vanilla. And so the teachers did a fan video where they played Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana. And I had banged the fuck out of that. My neck was sore, but it was so much fun. Also, comment down below if you ever want to see me headbang, and I will headbang. Not that I'm good at it, but I have enough hair now for it to at least do something. Also, I just remembered that in some of the baby metal music videos, they do have that whip your hair back and forth, whip your hair, type headbanging, and it's all done by these really just super iconic J-horse type actors. Think Tamara from The Ring, just that, the very classical Japanese um, ghost look. I guess it'd be yokai. I'm not really sure. I'm not that well versed in Japanese mythologies, but like what people think when they think Japanese horror. The small girl, very pale skin, very dark ebony hair, like long and scraggly, like just sort of loose hanging robes. That type of depiction, and then they would just like head banging back and forth, and I'm just like, it was such a great. It was great. I loved it. It was iconic. So I'm going to move on to another really, really strong contender for the genre, someone who's like has been really influential and has been in the scene for a long time, and that was Lady Baby, which that's a fun name. And I listened to the album Beside You. And so it's actually, I do want to talk a little bit about the history of the band before we get into me describing sort of the sound, just because I think it will be really important to understand the overall music. So Lady Baby started off with, let's see, two, it basically had a three-person lineup. I cannot remember the names, mostly because the first names are very similar. They're like Ray and Rai. And like the only thing that's different was like one letter like switched, and so like that's a little hard to like remember. The other one was easier to remember because it was the only guy that's ever been in the band, and his name is Ladybeard, and that's actually really interesting. So I'm going to like get into it in just a second. Basically, Beside You was, I guess, released just after the exiting of one of the singers. And I don't remember if it was Ray or Rai, or even if that's the way that those names are pronounced, because I am not familiar with Japanese phonemes, because I'm a fucking tool, I guess. But essentially one of the, let's see, remaining singers left the lineup, and let's start from the beginning. Basically, I think it was 2016, 2017, sometime around that time, and I will edit in the actual dates, hopefully. One of the first band member left, which was Ladybeard, who is a cross-dressing American wrestler, which you're like, okay. Basically, this guy, I don't remember his name exactly, I'll put it across the top, a good boy. He's a wrestler, and he used a lot of cross-dressing and crossplay, in his actual wrestling sort of persona. And then he moved on to do some music. And so, in some of the earlier stuff that they were singing, he mostly provided the harsh vocals. He had the more harder metal side of the Kawaii Metal, where the two girls did more of the idols part, doing the softer J-pop melodies. Interesting enough, I actually really enjoyed it just because you have this very hyper-masculine image, but through the cross-dressing and the other elements, he has this very kawaii aesthetic. And so it essentially, I believe the term is skag, where you have hypermasculinity on top of cross-dressing. And so it's basically that sort of aesthetic, which I thought was really interesting. And it also provided just a really great sort of pushing the envelope on the imagery of kawaii metal, where you, with Ladybird actually combining both the concept of the kawaii of the metal with the more, with his hypermasculine, I guess, personality and body type and voice, providing the more traditional metal ideal of just this very aggressive hypermasculinity. And so you have this really interesting, just you have this very iconic, idea of just these two very idol, Japanese women, and then there's also this very tall, huge, muscular man dressed the same way, also singing kawaii metal. And so it works in so many levels, and you have this not only inclusivity, but just a really great idea of all the concepts of metal and kawaii metal, and just the way that it works with gender expression, I guess. And I'm not sure if kawaii metal really has anything to do with gender expression, but I think it's interesting that kawaii metal is, I guess, more feminine or more cutesy, where traditional metal can be seen as much more hyper-masculine and much more, I guess, aggressive. And I keep using these buzzwords, but I'm not really thinking of any other way to describe it other than that sort of note. It's very, yeah. Anyway, basically, Ladybeard left, and I don't remember the exact reasons for him of leaving the band. Maybe he just, but I'm not going to speculate either, because somebody knows. If you do know more about the history of Lady Baby, do let me know down below. So essentially, he leaves, and I believe that he went on to work with another singer and started a band called Deadlift Lolita, which I was going to listen to, but considering that I listened to Lady Baby, I really want to avoid listening to derivative works or works that are made from similar artists or the same artists from different bands. So, if I was listening to, more indie rock, I wouldn't want to listen to, I don't know, How About They Found Me, and then listen to, the bands that those guys were originally from. Just because I'm going to be hearing so much from one band, I don't want to be hearing the same thing in another work because everyone takes their. I think it's useful if you're trying to listen to a person's work in both a group and solo setting, but I don't want to do that if I'm listening to a genre because that's going to bias me towards one particular type of sound because I'm hearing so much of one person's work in the entirety of the genre, which is not as helpful. I do want to listen to Deadlift Lolita eventually because I really like the idea and I'm really interested in Lady Beard as an artist, but I just didn't want to do that as part of this music corner. Hopefully you understand. Do let me know what you think about that philosophy or perspective. I want to hear your comments. But let's actually get on to why Beside You is so important. Essentially, Beside You was published just after the second member left, and I do not know how to say her name, and I'm not quite sure if I remember it either. But once again, I will put these up here so that you can look these people up, learn about their musical style, because they're all really capable and talented artists, and you should look them up and be interested in their stuff. Basically, she left, and I do know why she left actually. So she said that she was having throat issues due to the harsh singing and the constant traveling and touring and all that. And she also was just becoming very disenfranchised with the idol culture. And I think that Lady Baby definitely falls more into the idol concept of kawaii metal than a few of the other bands. But all of them do have some element of idol culture in their music, as it's sort of integral to both the J-pop aesthetic and the music itself, since you have this idol culture providing the cutesy kawaii aspects of the music. It's similar to how, I guess, cyberpunk is a visual. Cyberpunk? It's similar to how, C-punk or cyberpunk or, aspects of that have a very visual component, actually, better genre comparison, how Vaporwave has a very strong visual component and top of its very strong stylistic choices in the intonation and instrumentation. So in the same way that Vaporwave is all about fluorescent lighting and marble statues and stuff like that, all the 80s aesthetics, you also have that strong aesthetic with kawaii metal of the idol culture, the crinoline dresses, the gothic Lolita, all of that sort of visual motifs. So essentially, Beside You was published after the two members left, and so it's sort of a tribute for that past era of the band. Now that we've gone through all that, now that I've told you way too much about kawaii metal and all of these people that are barely in the album, let's actually get on to what it sounds like. First thing I noticed when I was listening to it is that it did have the metal aspect, but mostly it reminded me of Nintendo Core, which is a combining of chiptune or video game music with more heavy metal. The genre that I've seen described along with it is electronic core, which is a broader parent genre of Nintendo Core. But essentially, a lot of it has, some very strong metal vibes, not as harsh heavy metal as you see with baby metal, but it does have some amount of metal and punk aspects to it. Maybe just metal, maybe not punk, you know what I mean. It has, more metal aspects to it. But a lot of it is through very technical, virtuoso fingering, and through that sort of synthesized electrical, I guess, ferocity that you hear in things like Nintendo Core. So, you can basically think a lot of synthesizer, a lot of very technical sort of synthesized playing, and you sort of get a sense of some of the instrumentation in it. Since Lady Beard actually had left the band by the time Beside You was created, there was not as many harsh vocals as I would have preferred in a kawaii metal band. A lot of it was more the intense instrumental metal playing, and then just the J-pop melodies on top. Though there are some really interesting aspects in just, I guess, flow and speed of the lyrics and a few other things with the enjambment that really made it interesting on top of just being the sort of J-pop melody. And so I think that it worked fairly well, but it's much softer. So as I've listened to a few other Lady Baby songs, and Beside You was a much softer album than a few of the are the ones that have the harsh vocalists in it. And so if you're trying to get into metal, if you're trying to get into Kawaii Metal specifically, I definitely think that Beside You would be a good album since of how soft it is compared to the rest of the genre. And so I don't really have much more to say about the sound itself. I definitely think that I try my best to describe these things, but I am not a musical critic. I am not a musician. Well, I am a musician, but I'm not a professional musician or producer or like an agent or anything like that. So I don't have as strong of a vocabulary as someone else who, writes copy for musicians all day. And so I realized that I might be lacking in some of my descriptions of what the sound is like of all these things. And so I do apologize about that. That's why I give you recommendations so that you can actually listen to some songs I thought were really good and really sort of showcase their sound. And so, speaking of musical recommendations, I got two, as always. Easter Bunny, which I really enjoyed, just because, once again, that sort of cutesy title, but it had a really strong just back and forth between the two singers. And one thing I like about Lady Baby is that they have this softer and this more deeper voiced singer. And so you have this interplay with sounds as they trade lines. And it was fun. It was a little weird, like with the imagery, but it was just enjoyable. And then you have Lady Baby Blue, which is much more soft, much more melodic. It's like Lady Baby Blue. Almost like bedroom pop in the sense that it was a very soft, very emotive song. And I just really enjoyed it. Also, I really wonder about the relationship between the two singers just because I like songs like that because there definitely seems to be a very strong connection between the two. And I don't know if it's simply platonic or if it is something more than that, but I'm not going to speculate because that's rude. And so I'm going to move on to our third album just to, get our show on the road. And I was going to listen to Passcode. Unfortunately, Passcode has almost every single one of their songs behind a YouTube Premium paywall, which I didn't even know was a thing, but also, YouTube, can you stop being a piece of shit and putting everything in front of a paywall? Like, everything's advertised. Why do we have to, pay a premium membership to get the good shit, It's like, even in Spotify, I don't have to pay money to listen to any particular song. I might have to pay money to be able to listen to a specific song on mobile, but I can essentially listen to any song that I want on browser or other things. And so it's like, Spotify Premium, I'm paying to not listen to ads and to get a few other perks. YouTube Red, I'm paying to basically get a lot of content that is either the users have decided to put behind a paywall or other additional content, which is basically just YouTube trying to fight in the streaming wars, which, I'm sorry, YouTube is not going to win the streaming wars, and that is just the truth. People on this platform despite YouTube, not because of YouTube. But let's move on from my discontent to the was that B, and talk about Necronoma Idol. First of all, congratulations on that name. That's fantastic. I'm like, Necronoma? And then I'm like, oh, I get it. It's Lovecraft, that racist bastard. Also, it's really interesting to see how Lovecraft affects Japanese horror, but that's a tale for another time. And I listened to their album, Nemesis, which I like that name. I think Nemesis has a very strong, provocative, connotation to it, and so that sounds good. Let's go into sort of the genre descriptions, the sort of genres that I've seen used to describe them. And I've heard two genres more than the others, and that's black metal, which I'm not really sure what constitutes black metal or how it's different from other types of metal. If you're a metalhead, if you listen to a lot of metal, or if you just have a good grasp on that type of thing, feel free to explain it down below. I would love to hear your thoughts and how the genre is really important, because that would really help me grow as a music listener. And Witch House, which I did not know was a thing. Witch House is basically, I guess, more electronic, since house, obviously, but it's supposed to have these more dark, sort of Tumblr witchy vibes. And so, cultish, lyrics and that type of thing. And so I'm thinking, okay, so Bajas or something, but electronica. And so that is kind of the sort of feel that they're meant to give you. And with a name like Necronoma Idol, that sort of makes sense that it's going to be a little bit more occultish, it's going to be a little bit more spoopy. It's not going to be the sort of gory side of metal. It's going to be the more macabre, I guess, the culture side of metal. Yeah, and I can like sort of feel that. And so a lot of the music is much more, I guess, ephemeral. It has these more drifting trance-like melodies, which I enjoyed. And so the metal is not as, I guess, aggressive or high speed, but it is very technical, it's very precision, and so it has like, a lot of the aspects that you enjoy in metal. And I guess that would be the black metal in play, but like I said, I'm not as well versed in metal genres, and so I just do not recognize the influence as much as I would with more like, I guess, more common or mainstream genres of metal. I don't know. But I really enjoyed it. It's definitely the type of thing that I would play, like, if I was like, it's definitely the type of thing I would listen to if I was like having this sort of like whole Tumblr Witch aesthetic, or if like, I was just trying to like have a sort of like spoopy vibe. Because instead of it being disturbing or gory, the sound is much more creepy and eerie, I believe would be a good way to describe it. Also, I do feel like, there are a little bit of Lovecraftian like influences with it, which I liked. And there are like it was a lot of naming conventions in the song titles that definitely had a sort of witchy vibe to it, which I thought was really interesting. I'm not the biggest into the more like sort of occultist stuff. Like I like Baha'is, but it's not my cup of tea. I'm much more Joy Division type person when it comes to that type of stuff. But like I'll listen to a few songs and I'm just like, okay, Bela Lugosi is dead. Like go off, Quen. And so it's like, you have that sort of more dark, macabre sound with this band, which I thought was really interesting. Because it was cutesy, but it was also creepy. And so I'm just like, when you want to be kawaii, but you're really just kawaii, or how the term is pronounced. I'm going to give you my two recommendations, and so that is Skulls in the Stars, which was just this really intense, I'm not going to say Nintendo core, though there was a very strong sort of like stylization in the video with that. And they actually partnered with this artist whose name I cannot remember at the top of my head, but I have editing powers, like the magical beast I am, and so I'll put up there. And basically, so the video was all of these idol singers, like all of them, essentially being in this sort of 80s style pixel sprite, like, video game, and they were like attacking this giant, like Lovecraftian eldritch being. And then on top of that, like the music was playing, and it was just so good and so intense. Like, it was fantastic. Then there was also Ostrodon, which sounds like something creepy and esoteric. That's the word I was looking for earlier. And I just really enjoyed it. I don't remember much about the song itself, but I remember really liking it, which, wow, Ryan, what a glowing recommendation. I don't remember what it sounds like, but it was good. But it was. It was a really good song. I definitely liked Necronomic Idol. I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's definitely something I would listen to again, and it's definitely something that I would show people or use in my D&D campaign just because, like, how aesthetic the sound was. And so it was a really lovely genre. Album. So I guess, like, just wrapping this up, I liked Kawaii Metal. I thought it was really interesting. I know a lot of, I guess, true or, like, purist fans do not like Kawaii Metal. They don't like having all this cutesy imagery on top of, like, everything else. But I think that is a bit silly of a argument. Obviously, there are many people, and I'll probably have a genre myself where I don't want to see as much fusion in it. But I think that a lot of times with genres, you're going to have people who listen to the music, who enjoy it, but also want to bring it into their own sort of truth. They want to add something to it, which is very much theirs. And so I think that Kawaii Metal has a lot of really interesting concepts and a really interesting way of presenting metal. Because I think that a lot of times, and once again, I can't speak Japanese. Like, girl walk in the club, somebody say, "Oh, wa ojinji ga yaseko nande yo," and I'm just like, "Nande aso wa pinko." Like, I have no idea what's happening. I don't know why I'm Russian. I don't speak Japanese, so I don't really know if the lyrics are as dark or macabre, or if they're like super bright and sunny, and they're like, "Sunny, happy people, happy." Yeah, like, I don't know, like, what the lyrics are like, But it's like, I like Kawaii Metal because it has this sort of macabre, cutesy feel, and it can also be very bright and bubbly. And I think that's really nice because a lot of times in metal you get these very intense, very aggressive, often very ultraviolet style songs, which are useful. I think that all genres of music have their own part of the human condition they want to express. But I also like Kawaii Metal because it allows you to have a much more light, much more brighter side of the genre that has the intensity and skill that you enjoy from metal, while also not being as aggressive of a tone as more other metal genres. I also like that Kawaii Metal is very, I guess, female oriented. A lot of the singers in Kawaii Metal are women. There are not as many men. And so I think that's like, a nice contrast to a genre which is predominantly male, as far as I can tell. Yeah, you have a few famous female metal singers, but it's not as common, at least in the, metal that I listen to. It's not as common for there to be that as many female, metal singers. And so I like that there are harsh vocalists in these ones that are women. I like that there are musicians and singers and all these ones that can play metal and enjoy creating metal music that are women. And so that we can see the genre from a different perspective and also from a different culture. And so I really enjoyed that. I really liked just everything I saw from the genre because it had a lot of really interesting crossover with other genres, and it had a really interesting sound that I was not used to with the type of metal that I listened to. Anyway, guys, I'm gonna wrap this up. I really enjoyed talking to you about this today, and let me know down below what are your thoughts on Kawaii Metal. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Are there other metal genres that I should know about? Also, feel free to let me know your opinions about metal, or if you agree with my opinions about, this genre. Just, tell me about it, because I want to start a conversation. That's why I like doing these music corners, because I like talking about music. I love music, and so I started making these because a lot of the times, a lot of my friends either didn't listen to the same music that I did, or they just were not as versed in the type of music that I liked. I really only have one friend that knows what bedroom pop is, and it's I want to share, my videos, my, ideas with, my people that I can have a discussion with. And so I would love to hear from you about, all of these, bands and genres, and, things that I listen to and talk about. Also, definitely below if you have any recommendations for my channel, for my videos, for my tech, and for future music corners. I always want band recommendations and genre recommendations. Comment down below. I want to hear from you like I've been saying. Also, you can like and subscribe. That's totally okay. I'll let you do it. And you can share this video if you have anyone who likes Kawaii Metal and wants to, talk about it. Anyway, guys, like I said, I'm going to shut up now. I have some stuff I want to do today that isn't sitting from the camera and gushing about Japanese, singers screaming about death. I know. Can you believe that little bitch I am? But anyway, I'm going to run away now and live my best life. I want you to do the same. Just remember, wash your hands, tell your loved ones you love them, and stay safe. This is False Bulls 123. I'm signing off.